I still replay the moment in my head sometimes, the sight of Sergeant Major staring down at my father with that cold, terrifying intensity that could make a seasoned combat veteran sweat. He was holding a freshly ironed uniform shirt, the sleeves perfectly creased, and I remember thinking, asterisk, this is it asterisk. I was just a kid, 15 years old, curled up in the barracks clinic with 2 cracked ribs, bruises covering half my body, and a lie ready on my tongue about a clumsy fall during PT. But Sergeant Major, this immovable force of discipline and tradition, he didn't just look at me. He looked asterisk through asterisk me. He knew. And what he did next completely changed the trajectory of my life, a life that was heading straight toward an early grave at the hands of the man who was supposed to protect me. I need to know, truly, was he right to cross that line? Was his unexpected, monumental intervention justified? Or did he overstep when he brought the full, terrifying weight of the military down on a civilian matter? Tell me honestly, if you were him, would you have risked your entire career, your reputation, everything you'd built, for one bruised and broken recruit? That's what this whole story comes down to. The story really starts years before I ever stepped foot on the parade square, years before the pain became a constant companion. My father, let's call him Frank, had been a Marine. Not just asterisk a asterisk Marine, but asterisk the asterisk Marine in his own mind. He had served, gotten an honorable discharge, and then spent the rest of his life convinced that the world, and specifically his family, needed to be run like a perpetual boot camp. My mother, God rest her soul, tried to mitigate it, but she was slowly worn down, disappearing into herself until she passed away when I was 10. After that, the pretense of a normal family life dissolved entirely. It was just me and Frank, and the house became his personal barracks. When I was 12, he enrolled me in a high school junior reserve officers training corps program, JROTC, not because I was interested, but because he saw it as the last bastion of true discipline. In a soft world, I wasn't just in JROTC, I was JROTC. Every waking hour outside of school was spent polishing my boots, memorizing military history, or doing extra, unauthorized PT. It was a suffocating existence, but it kept the really bad stuff at bay, mostly. The program's senior Army instructor, the man I came to know as Sergeant Major Reynolds, was the only source of structured normalcy and genuine respect I'd ever known. He was a mountain of a man, all crisp starch, gleaming brass, and a voice that could shatter glass. But he ran his corps with a bizarre mix of absolute discipline and genuine, paternal care. He was retired Army infantry, special forces, the whole 9 yards, and he demanded perfection. But if you gave him your best, even if it was flawed, he would fiercely defend you. I needed that defense more than I knew. My grades were impeccable, my uniform immaculate, and I quickly rose through the ranks because, frankly, I was terrified of what would happen at home if I didn't. The discipline, the structure, the pain, it was all just a slightly more regulated version of my home life, but at school it felt clean, deserved, earned. At home it felt random and cruel. The real trouble started a few months before the incident with the ribs. I had been selected to lead the rifle team, a huge honor, and it required countless hours after school. This meant I was often late getting home, or sometimes I had to miss one of my father's arbitrary inspection sessions. He didn't care about the honor. He only saw it as insubordination and a challenge to his authority. The first time he really went off the rails was over a single, stray thread on my uniform. I had been up until 2 a.m. cleaning it for a formal inspection, and when I presented it to him, he zeroed in on the thread near the collar. He didn't just point it out, he called me weak, sloppy, and dishonorable. He tore the shirt off me, threw it on the floor, and then he took the belt. That night, I learned to keep my screams silent, learned to focus on the pain as a way to detach from the source of it. The next morning, I taped my side and showed up for drill practice at 0.6, 0.0, smiling, ramrod straight, and pretending that the walk to school wasn't pure agony. Sergeant Major Reynolds noticed. He didn't say anything, but he looked at my slight hesitation when I snapped to attention, the unnatural way I held my left arm. He's trained to notice details, trained to see weakness under pressure, and he saw something that wasn't right. He cornered me later, after drill, in the armory where we kept the rifles. He didn't yell. He just spoke in that low, controlled rumble that was somehow more intimidating than any shout. He asked me, straight out, "Cadet, what is wrong?" And I, conditioned to protect my father and terrified of the shame, lied. "Nothing, Sergeant Major, just a bad night's sleep. Preparing for the formal inspection is stressing me out." He just looked at me, a long, assessing gaze, and then said, "You are carrying yourself like you are broken, Cadet. You fix it. I want you at 100% for the inspection. Dismissed." The unspoken threat was clear. Disappoint him, and the consequences would be severe. But the truth was, I was broken, just not in the way he thought. I kept up the charade for weeks, becoming a master of distraction. I poured myself into JROTC, leading my team to victory after victory, earning my father's fleeting, grudging approval only to lose it over the next perceived infraction. The pressure cooker was building up, and I knew, deep down, that the lid was about to blow. The evening of the rib incident was a flashpoint over something incredibly trivial, a misplaced sock. It escalated in seconds from a loud accusation to a violent rage. He hit me, then he pushed me into the corner of the dresser. The crack I heard wasn't the wood. It was my body finally giving out. The pain was immediate, sharp, and took my breath away. He stared at me, his face pale for a split second, then the rage returned. "You fell. You will tell them you fell during extra PT. Do you understand, Cadet?" The threat in his voice was unmistakable. The next morning, barely able to breathe, I dragged myself to school. I collapsed during the morning formation. Sergeant Major was the first one there, barking orders for the medics, his face a mask of concern and something else. Suspicion. He rode with me in the ambulance to the local military base clinic, insisting I be seen by a military doctor, a privilege of the JROTC program. In the clinic, the X-rays confirmed 2 cracked ribs and a severe concussion. When the doctor asked me what happened, I recited the lie perfectly. Fell off the parallel bars during an unsupervised early morning PT session, sir. I know I should have followed regulations and waited for a spotter. It was my fault. I saw Sergeant Major's jaw clench. He didn't contradict me, but he dismissed the doctor and waited until we were alone in the small room. He looked at the bruises that the nurse hadn't been able to hide, the dark, starburst patterns that no fall could create. He leaned close, his massive frame blocking out the light, and whispered, "Cadet, I have seen hundreds of falls. I have seen ID blast victims. You didn't fall on a parallel bar. Now, you look me in the eye and you tell me the truth." The intensity was unbearable. I broke. I just started sobbing, shaking my head, still unable to speak the words. He didn't press me. He just nodded, his face hardening into an expression of cold, terrifying resolve. He didn't need the words. He had seen enough to know. So that's the situation I was in. I was 15, lying in a military clinic with broken ribs, protected only by a thin white curtain, and the one man I looked up to, the man who represented law and order, had just realized that source of my pain was the man who was supposed to be my protector, my father. Sergeant Major Reynolds, a man whose entire life was governed by duty, honor, and chain of command, was faced with a massive moral and professional dilemma: uphold the law and report my father, a civilian, thereby shattering my life and his own career, or cover it up, protect the program, and leave me in the hands of my abuser. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes, or more importantly, what you would have done if you were Sergeant Major. Would you prioritize a teenager's safety over your military career? When Frank, my father, walked into the clinic, he was all bluster and outrage, yelling about how the JROTC program was reckless and demanding to know who was going to pay for the medical bills. He was trying to project dominance, but the room was already filled with a different kind of power. Sergeant Major Reynolds stood up, and the effect was immediate. Frank, who never bowed to anyone, actually took a half step back. Reynolds didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice above a parade, ground level, but every word was a hammer blow. "Mr. Frank," he said, his eyes never leaving my father's, "there will be no bills for this young man. The program covers all injuries sustained during sanctioned activities. However," and he paused for a moment that felt like an hour, "this was not a sanctioned activity. The doctor found inconsistencies with the alleged fall, inconsistencies that point to a pattern of abuse. I have personally inspected Cadet's uniform and found discrepancies between his account and the evidence. The fall story is, frankly, disrespectful to the Corps." Frank started to protest, but Sergeant Major simply cut him off with a hand gesture. "Your son is under my authority while he is in this uniform and in this facility. You are not allowed to remove him." The audacity was breathtaking. Frank tried to pull rank, to talk about his own service, his own discipline, but Reynolds just stared him down. "Your service," he said, the words cutting like ice, "does not give you the right to violate the core values of honor and respect. What you have done is a disgrace to the uniform you once wore." It escalated quickly from there. Sergeant Major didn't call the police. He did something much more effective and, in a strange way, more military. He called the base commander's office and, pulling every favor and every bit of his storied reputation, he leveraged the military's internal family advocacy and support system. He stated that a JROTC cadet had been gravely injured while in the care of the program, and while the injuries were sustained off campus, the home environment was clearly hostile and dangerous to a child under the school's direct supervision. It was a bureaucratic masterpiece, a legalistic way to bypass the slow, often ineffective civilian system. By the time Frank realized what was happening, it was too late. Two impeccably dressed, official-looking personnel from the base's social work services were there, along with an MP. Frank was escorted out of the base, officially barred from stepping foot on the property. I stayed in the clinic under observation for 3 days, and when I was released, Sergeant Major and his wife, a kind, quiet woman I had never met before, were waiting. They didn't take me home. They took me to their home, a temporary foster placement, while the official investigation proceeded. The aftermath was swift and brutal for my father. The investigation didn't just look at the ribs. It looked at years of my medical records, the reports from school counselors that I had always fiercely denied, and my sudden excellence in JROTC, which Reynolds framed as a survival mechanism. Frank was arrested, though he was eventually released on bail, the charges for felony child abuse hanging over his head. The trial was long and humiliating for him, and in the end, he was convicted and sentenced to probation and mandatory counseling, stripped of his right to ever have full custody of me again. For Sergeant Major, The consequences were also significant, though not what I feared. His bold move caused a massive ripple effect in the school district and the military liaison office. He was reprimanded for overstepping his bounds and inappropriate use of base resources. But because he had saved a child and done it under the umbrella of cadet welfare, he avoided being fired. He was instead put on a permanent administrative assignment, effectively ending his active instruction career. He accepted it without a single complaint. He told me once, much later, "My duty is to the Corps, cadet, and you are the Corps. I was defending my own." I lived with the Reynolds family for the next 2 years until I was old enough to legally make my own choices, and was placed with a distant, loving aunt in another state. Sergeant Major stayed in touch, never pushing, always just an anchor. He gave me a sense of honor that Frank had corrupted, and he gave me the one thing I never had, safety. I look back now, a functioning adult, and I realize the depth of what he did. He didn't just call Child Protective Services. He weaponized the military's internal, rapid response structure to instantly remove me from danger. He traded his own professional trajectory for my life. It was a massive, morally gray area, an abuse of power, perhaps, but done for the purest reason imaginable. He broke the rules, but in doing so, he upheld a higher law, the protection of the vulnerable. My father's life was ruined, his reputation destroyed, and he never forgave either of us. But my life was saved. I got to grow up. I got to breathe without pain. Was Sergeant Major Reynolds wrong to cross that line, to bring the full, unforgiving weight of the military, industrial complex down on a private family matter? I don't think so, but it's a hell of a question. That's my story, and I still carry a piece of that broken rib and that broken silence with me every single day. Like this video if you were on my side and believed the Sergeant Major was a hero. Subscribe for more true stories about the shocking things people do when pushed to the limit. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Do you think he was a hero or a renegade? I'll see you all in the next story.